All right,
pretty
let's
wild.
let's talk about the quarterback that is the 49ers quarterback. He's our quarterback. What is it about Brock Purdy that makes him right for this team right now? And what do you think he brings to the 49ers that they like so much?
I think he sees the game the way that Kyle Shanahan sees the game.
Yeah.
And I think ultimately that was the biggest deciding factor between him and Trey Lance is Kyle Shanahan and Brock Purdy seemed to just fit right when Brock Purdy jumped into, the starting role. It seemed like, and I think maybe part of it is his limitations that as a quarterback, like he doesn't have the arm strength that Trey Lance has. He doesn't have necessarily the quote unquote athleticism, even though Brock Purdy to me is extremely athletic. He definitely can get out of trouble with his legs. But I think because he doesn't necessarily have that strong arm, like he just goes where the design tells him to go, right? He just goes to where the ball's supposed to go, where the read's supposed to go. And ultimately you can just tell. And I think I mentioned this during when he started going, we were doing our streams. I was like, Brock Purdy and Kyle Shanahan just seem to be on the same page right away. And I think that ultimately is one thing. And then just as intangibles, right? We heard how the team responded to him. It was not, he didn't carry himself like a rookie. And he has this like ability to ball out and still really be humble and give all the praise to his team. And I think that ultimately bought him a lot of like I guess currency with the team around him. And I think the team just loves to play with him, man. I think the guys really enjoy, him being the quarterback, him being the leader. And, I think that, obviously there's probably going to be a little bit of a pullback just because now there's film on him and people have, 7-8 games of him playing. So they're going to know kind of what he's able to do, what he's not able to do. But it's hard to argue with the production that he had, the amount of 2 touchdown games he had, how the 49ers were scoring with him there. And even though I'm big on, hey, I think CMC is the main reason why this 49er offense started scoring the way that they scored. Like there was, a difference between Jimmy G as the quarterback and Brock Purdy when it came to, the scoring. And obviously the defense played a role in that and all that kind of stuff. But I think his intangibles, Jesse, I think that his ability to see the game more similarly to Kyle Shanahan and his ability to just really get the team to buy into him, I think are the 3 biggest things that really separated him from the other quarterbacks.
Yeah, I think for me, I've seen that a lot where a lot of people will question like, okay, what about when the film's out on him? And I do think for me, that's not a concern. It's just a question mark. But I also have said multiple times that I think if you're going to see a drop off from Brock Purdy, I really don't think it comes this year. I don't. I mean, barring a ton of injuries. Now, if CMC goes down and Trent Williams go down or something crazy like that, or CMC and Kittle go down, then maybe you see it. But assuming these weapons for the most part are healthy, I don't think film coming out on Brock Purdy is going to be his downfall. I'm more curious to what it looks like next year because I have confidence in him this year. That's why I said he's Mr. Right now, but I don't know if he's Mr. Right because when that talent starts getting stripped away, that's when I start to have questions. And the reason I don't have those questions for this year, assuming health for the most part with this roster, is because of some of those things that you talked about. His leadership. I mean, you see it. He oozes leadership. You saw it at Iowa State, by the way. That was something that everybody talked about that came in and out of that program. It's something that his coach talked about. You saw the way that they embraced in that final home game. Like it was clear that Brock Purdy brought something different to that organization, I guess you can call it, that program, that school. And the leadership is definitely there. You also saw it on the Thursday night football game against Seattle, where Kittle's wearing the stupid Jimmy G t-shirt. and he's like, dude, like this guy doesn't ever shut up. Like, you know what I mean? Like you just
Yeah.
see it. He's not afraid. So I think there's that. I think he's poised. I think there's a fearlessness to his game, despite some of the maybe physical limitations. He plays as if he has none, which can be a bad thing. I
Yeah.
mean, you saw it with Jimmy Garoppolo. I would say in his situation, it was a bad thing. I think sometimes for Brock Purdy, it can be a situation where he puts the ball in harm's way where he doesn't necessarily need to. But I would say for the most part, when it comes to Brock Purdy, that fearlessness is something that he needs to continue to have. And I think that is something that makes him as good as he has been. You talked about athleticism. No, he's not going to run a straight line speed 40 very fast, but he's very quick and he can get away from defenders in the pocket. And I think that is a massive asset. That is something that Jimmy G never had and Jimmy G would never have. And so I think that is a big reason why he works with Kyle Shanahan. He is a player that you can run boot actions and those types of things with. You can move the launch point with and know that he's going to get out there quick enough to make these throws and move the pocket. And I think that is a staple of the Shanahan offense that really has been missing for Kyle here in San Francisco. And then the last thing is he gets the ball to his weapons. I mean, there's nothing wrong with having a lot of weapons and knowing how to get the ball to them and letting them do the work. Like
Right.
that's not a bad thing. You know what I mean?
That's kind of what you're supposed to do, right?
That is what you're like. He's a point guard, like a traditional true point guard in the sense
Right.
of, Patrick Mahomes, if he's the quarterback is a point guard. If Patrick Mahomes is Steph Curry, I don't think there's anything wrong with being Chris Paul or John Stockton. You're talking about very, very good players that
Right.
are top 10 all time in their position. Like if you could be that your whole career and you continue to have weapons around you that can do with the ball what the 49ers weapons can do now, you can play for a very, very long time in this league. Now, it's not my preference at the quarterback position. We've had this conversation when we talked about a Drew Brees versus a Ben Roethlisberger. I'm taking Ben Roethlisberger, no question, but people would take Drew Brees and they would prefer that. And so that is totally fine. So those are the things why, like, those are the reasons to me why Brock Purdy works right now, specifically for this team. And then, the last thing would be exactly what you touched on, which is he and Shanahan just seem to click. They see the game very similarly. That's what Shanahan wants, and it works out. So,
yeah. And I mean, I the offense looks great under him for a lot of the things that you mentioned. And, I think one of the biggest criticisms of Brock Purdy, which I think isn't a fair criticism, Jesse, is the Jimmy G criticism. They're like, oh, well, Jimmy G had 5 games where he went undefeated and, and all this. And I'm like, all right, I understand what people are saying. Like, okay, after just a short amount of time, you can't all of a sudden just know this is the guy. However, the 49ers don't have to make him $100 million quarterback. Like the benefit of Brock Purdy is he's under contract. He's still a rookie contract. They still have at least 2 years before they have to make a decision on paying him like a quote unquote franchise quarterback or not. So it's like the ideal situation. Like we get to finally see exactly what we have in Brock Purdy without having to give, the farm to him financially like they did with Jimmy G. Ultimately, I think that most people wouldn't have had a problem with Jimmy G if he was $1 million a year, right? Because you're able to put the type of talent around him that Jimmy G could, look good with, right? That's the same thing with Brock Purdy. Now, ultimately, when that talent starts to dissipate, then we get to see if Brock Purdy's the quote unquote real deal or not. But he's a really, really great quarterback for what this roster is right now. And I don't think it's fair to constantly be like they're doing the same thing that they did with Jimmy G, because it's not the same situation. The Jimmy G issue was they paid him too early. They're not paying Brock Purdy too early. They're just giving him an opportunity to really see who he is.